This video is going to cover the exercise in the book 3-44-8 entitled the vent cover. And I've got it drawn here with some dimensions so we can get an idea of what we're looking at. In this exercise, we'll be using the circle command, we'll be using the mirror command, we'll be doing some trimming, we'll be using the offset command. Also, we'll be using the ellipse command here. And down below here on our status bar, we'll be toggling ortho on and off as we need to. Here I've got the OSnap toolbar loaded already. If you don't have that loaded currently, what you can do is go to the pull down menu called Tools, click that, and you'll see toolbars, and then you see AutoCAD, follow the flyout and make sure that Object Snap is checked. At first look at this, it looks like there's a lot of things going on. It looks very busy, but I'm going to try to break it down so that we'll do it one step at a time. And we'll be using the mirror command a lot so we don't have to redraw every piece. In this exercise, it appears that the circle, the center of that circle is going to be at 0, 0. So that's going to be our origin for this particular project. And if I were to click on this object right here, that's the first thing we're going to draw. And as I'm looking at the dimensions, I know that it's going to be 1.5 in diameter. So we've got the center point and we've got the diameter. So let's go ahead and draw it. And I've got this situated, so it's just down below here, and we'll be going back and forth. So I want to draw a circle, and if I hit the down button on the ribbon here, I've got center radius, center diameter, 2.3 points, so on. I'm just going to use the center radius. And the diameter was 1.5, and I know my radius is half of that, which is 0.7. So I'm going to be using a radius of 0.75 for this. The first thing that the command is asking me for is the center point of the circle. I could pick any place I want to, but I know for sure that I want to put that at 0, 0. That's 0 in the X and 0 in the Y. So I just type in 0, 0. And right now I'm dragging that circle from that origin. And you can, I know it's at 0 because I can tell the X, Y, and Z, or the X and Y axis is there, and my circle's right there at the center. So what we can do here is just type in the radius, which is 0.75. And now we have our circle. So that's going to be the start point of this exercise. I'm going to bounce back up the top here. The next thing that I'd like to draw is this ellipse. And the ellipse is going to share that same center point of the circle. So when we go to the ellipse command, we can either type in 0, 0, or I can turn my OSnap on to pick the center of that circle. And just to check and see what our OSnap is right now, if I come down here to this icon here, if I do a right click and go Object Snap Settings, I can see that I currently have endpoint, midpoint, center, and intersection. I think that'll work for this exercise. I think I might turn midpoint off. I'm not going to be using that. Eventually I'm going to be using quadrant, but I want to do that as a one-time only. I don't want to have that set to be in a running mode. So I'm good here. So I know that this ellipse, if we look at it, the total length of the ellipse is 8 inches across. The height of this ellipse is 5 inches. So once we pick the center, we can drag it out the distance of that radius, which for the length would be 4 and for the height would be 2.5. So that's how we'll attack that. So we'll go back down, and when we click on the ellipse command up here, we hit the drop down, we can see we've got different options, center, axis end, and elliptical arc. I'm going to use center. And at the command prompt, it's asking me for the center of my ellipse. I can type in 0, 0, but since I've got a circle there and I've got my OSnap already set to circle, I can just pick my circle. I'm zooming in a little bit. As soon as I do that, you can see my little green marker there letting me know that I've got the center of that circle. So I'm going to go ahead and left click. AutoCAD wants to know an endpoint of an axis, and I can either type in the y-axis or the x-axis. I'm going to drag to the right to specify the total length of that ellipse. And right now it's asking for that radius. So if I drag it in this direction and type in 4 and hit enter, So it found that 4, and my overall now is 8 inches. Now it's asking me for the other axis endpoint. So as I'm just dragging up and down here to kind of give you an idea of what it's doing. I know that the total height is 5, so from the center, if I drag it up 2.5, which is half of 5, I should be able to get it. So I'll drag it in the direction, which is up above, type in 2.5 and hit enter. And there's my ellipse. So let's go back up here and see what we've got. So I've got my ellipse and I have my circle. The next thing that I want to draw is my polygon. And this is actually a hexagon, so it's going to have 6 sides. And from your reading in your book, we know when we do a polygon, we can either do it circumscribed about a circle or inscribed inside of a circle. This is going to be, as I'm looking at this polygon, the overall height of it is 1 inch. And from the center to this point here would be half of that. So we're going to have this circumscribed about the circle. So what I'm going to do, and what else do we know about this? We also know that it is 3 inches from the center. We can look at this, we know this is a symmetrical object. We can see it's 3 inches here as well. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this right side one first. And there's a couple ways I can do this. I could draw this polygon so the center is the same center as my circle, and then I can move it over 3 inches. Another thing I can do, I could actually go in and draw a construction line. I could draw a line from the center of the circle to the right or to the left 3 inches, and at that endpoint it would become my center. But at the end of the day, I really only have to draw this once, because eventually I'm going to draw it on either side and then I'm going to mirror it about the center of that circle. So let's go ahead and draw the polygon. And for this one, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it at the center of my circle and move it. That way we can use the move command as well. The polygon command can be picked up from the draw panel of the home tab. And right now we see an icon here that doesn't look like a polygon, but if I hit that drop down button, it was actually on rectangle as a default, so I'm going to select polygon. And on my command prompt, it's asking me for the number of sides. And this is a hexagon, so we're going to type in 6 and hit enter. It's now asking me for the center of that polygon. I'm going to move my cursor over on the circle, and as soon as I do that, because my O snap, my object snap, is set to center, it's going to pick the center of that circle up. So I'll left click on my circle, and on my screen here, I've got it set up so it comes up right in front of me and it asks me, do you want to do inscribed or circumscribed about the circle? Also down in the command prompt, you'll notice too, it asks that same question. And we can either pick it here on the screen where my cursor is, or I can type in from the command prompt. In this case, I want circumscribed. So I could either type a C and hit enter, or I could just pick the circumscribed right here. So I'm going to drag it up in the direction and type in 0.5, which is half of 1. And now we have our polygon. It's at the center. It needs to be over to the right 3 inches. So what I'm going to do is use the move command. And I can find that on my ribbon from the home tab under the modify panel. I'm going to click on that polygon. And when it asks me if I want to select any more objects, I hit enter. For a base point, I'm just going to pick out in space someplace. So I'm going to drag in the direction and type 3 and hit enter. And now it moves it over. I think what I'll do now, I'm going to go ahead and mirror that. There's some other things we could draw. We can mirror a bunch of stuff, but just to avoid confusion, let's mirror that right now. Let's go to the mirror command, which is also from the home tab in the modify panel. We'll click mirror. I select my polygon and hit enter. At this point, AutoCAD wants to know an axis, and we've got to specify an axis. And we want to rotate it about the center of this object. And we know that the center is going to be the center of the circle. So since my O snap is set to find the center of the circle, I'm going to go ahead and click on that circle, and then I can drag it straight up or straight down. Now, if you're not dragging it straight up or straight down, you'll need to come down here on the status bar and make sure that your ortho is on. So I'll drag it straight up, someplace off the object. Sometimes if you grab on the object here, or if you move up here and click on the object, it'll grab an awkward O snap or an O snap that you don't want. So I'm going to drag it so it's clear of all objects, left click, and then AutoCAD says, do you want to erase the source object? In this case, I don't. There might be a time when you want to just move it to the other side by using the mirror command. But in this case, we don't. So I hit enter for no. And now we have the ellipse, the circle, and the two polygons. The next part is probably the most difficult part of this exercise, and it's drawing this object here, the slot. And at first glance, it might look a little bit overwhelming, but we're going to break it down into pieces. One of the things we know is that it gives us a radius dimension of 0.75, and that radius is going to the center of this slot. And if we look at the dimension of where that center of the slot is, we can see that it's 0.75 below the center of that circle here, this dimension right here. And we know that it's 1 inch from the center of the circle in the X direction. So from the reading from your book, we could use the absolute coordinate for the center of that circle of 1, negative 0.75. So what we're going to do first is draw this slot. We'll eventually erase it, but we need to get that slot so we can offset to get this line here and offset to get this line. And that offset distance is going to be 0.25 right here. So anyway, the first thing we do, let's go ahead and find this line here by drawing a circle at the absolute coordinates of x, negative 0.75. So there's our circle command. It's asking for the center point, so we said that we want to go 1, negative 0.75. And when I say negative, it's that minus sign that you can use. So I'll hit enter, and there I found my center. The radius is 0.75 we talked about. If I go back up here, I'm still dragging the circle, but that's how I know that the radius is 0.75. So I'll just type in 0.75 here. And once we do that, it draws the circle there for us. Now we're going to be doing some trimming here. And the way I want to trim this, I want to go to the line command. I want to draw a line from the center of the circle to the right. And I'm just dragging it way out past the objects. I'm dragging it out a lot further than I really need to, but that's all right. I'm going to go back in the line command, draw another line, and I'm going to drag it straight down. At this point here, I'm going to use the trim command. I want to trim off the part of the circle, this part here that I don't need. And I can do the trim command from the Home tab, Modify panel. And my objects that I want to use as trimming edges would be this line. I'm going to click there and click that line. I don't need any more cutting edges, so I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to select the part of the circle that I don't need, which is right here. At this point, there are a few ways to draw this. What I'm going to do is draw some lines from this point over 2.5 to the left, and from this point right here up 2.5. If I come back up and look at this here, that's where I'm at right there at that point. If I draw it 2.5 up, that gives me the center of the circle of that slot. And the same thing down here, if I go from that endpoint to the left 2.25, I get the center of that slot. So that's kind of what we're going to do. We'll draw those two lines as construction lines. Then we've got the endpoint, which becomes the center point of the circle. So let's give that a shot. So let's go back to the line command. I'll use that point. I've got the endpoint object snap. That's why it grabs that. I'm going to drag it straight up, type in 0.25 and hit enter. hit enter to get out of the line command. All commands in AutoCAD are repeating, by the way, so if you hit enter again, my line command comes back so I don't have to pick it from the ribbon. This time I'm going to select this endpoint, drag it over 0.25, drag it over to the left, and then type in 0.25 and hit enter again. So those are going to be my 2 points for my circle centers. So let's go ahead and draw the circles now. There's one endpoint, and my radius is 0.25. I'm going to draw another circle again. I pick the center point. I drag it either up or to the left, it doesn't matter, and type in 0.25 and hit enter. I want to offset the center of this slot 0.25. So the offset command is from the modify panel of the home tab as well. And it's asking me for my offset distance. I will type in 0.25. Once I do that, it's asking me to select an object. So I'm going to select the center of that slot. And then I'm going to pick a point up here, up above, and left click. It kind of gives me a preview. So once I left click, it puts it there permanently. I'm going to select that same line again, or I guess it's actually an arc. And this time I'm going to point down below. And again, I get a preview there. I'm just going to left click. So there's my slot. Now what we got to do is we've got to match these end points of this arc to the top of that circle. Same thing down here with this line to the bottom of the circle, and then do the same thing up above. So let's go to the line command, and I could drag it out here and then come back and trim, but I know that it's going to be at the top of that circle, and I could either do tangent, but since I know it's going to be the top, I can use quadrant. So I pick quadrant and hit enter. So I go to the line, and when I say quadrant, I'm talking the quadrant O-snap. The quadrant O-snap is going to find points along the circle at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 12 o'clock. There we go, hit enter there. I go back into the line command, and my O-snap toolbar's up there, so I can pick quadrant, pick that at 9 o'clock, hit enter. I can hit enter again to go back into the line command, click that endpoint, and click quadrant, and there we go. So now that I've got my slots, I think what I'll do here is let's do some cleanup. Let's go ahead and get rid of these lines. So I'm just going to go into the erase command. I guess I should do it from the ribbon. I was typing in E and hitting enter. That's a shortcut. And I'm going to use a crossing window. I'm going to click down to the right of that point, drag it up to the left, and left click. It grabs both lines. I hit enter. I'm going to hit enter again, and I want to get rid of this line, the center of that slot, and this line. Now this line right here, I can't erase. If I erase it, the entire circle erases. Same thing right here. So what I need to do is use the trim command, and I want to pick this line, this line. You can see it's just a little line segment, so I've got to be careful, make sure I get the right ones. I hit enter. Now I can select the pieces I want to get rid of. So now we have that little slot, and we could do the same thing on this side. We could do it up above and to the right, and I know that would be fun, but being kind of lazy, what I like to do is just mirror that thing because it's the same thing. So let's go to the mirror command. Now it's asking me to select objects. Now here, we could go around and select each of those lines individually. I'm going to use the crossing window. Actually, I'm going to use not the crossing window, but just the window command. And for this command, I pick to the left of the object, and I come down to the right, and I see a blue box. And when I do that, the only thing that's going to be selected are items that are completely inside. And even though I've selected the circle, or even though parts of the circle and the polygon and that ellipse are in this blue box, only that slot is going to be selected this way. So I'm going to go ahead and left click. I can see the objects that are highlighted. I'm going to hit enter, and now I'm going to specify the first point of my mirror line axis. I'm reading the command prompt. And those of you guys who are just starting out with AutoCAD, it's always a good idea to look at that command prompt to get an idea of what AutoCAD is asking you for. So I'll left click the center of that circle. I drag it down. I left click again to specify the endpoint of that axis. AutoCAD is now asking, do you want to erase the source objects? No, we don't. We went to a lot of work. So I'm going to hit enter. So I'll go back into the mirror command. This time let's use that window again, that same kind of window we used a second ago to get those objects. Again, because we went from left to right, we didn't pick up that center circle. I'm going to hit enter. And this time we'll pick the center of that same circle and drag it to the right. Left click. AutoCAD is saying, do you want to erase the source objects? No, we don't want to erase those. We hit enter. And there we have the slots up above. So in this exercise, it's good to kind of break it down if you can in pieces. And what we did first was we drew the circle. That was low-hanging fruit. Then we did the ellipse. We drew the polygon, the six-sided polygon. We know that it was circumscribed about the circle with a radius of 0.5. We drew it at the center of the object at 0, 0, or the center of the circle. Once we drew it there, we moved it over 3, and then we mirrored it about the center of that circle. And then we attacked the slot by drawing the center line of that slot, doing some offsetting, drawing the little circles at each end of the slot. And then we went in and trimmed up some of those lines and cleaned some things up by trimming and erasing. We mirrored that one over to the left and then both the slots up to the top.